If you want to give wealth to 5 billion people, Brian, you can't do it with gold. You can't do it with land. You can't do it with buildings, and you can't do it with 20th century stocks. You can't do it with collectibles and art. You can't do it with diamonds. Those are 20th century property. They work for the elite. You can give 10% of the people wealth that way. You can give 10 or 20% of the people wealth with banks and stock exchanges. If you want to give 5 billion people wealth, you need to give them digital property. You need to give them digital gold on an open monetary protocol running on a $50 Android phone. And that's what Bitcoin is. Once you understand what we've got here, you put Bitcoin together with an Android phone with an application. It could be a layer 2 decentralized application like Lightning, or it could be Square Cash App, or it could be PayPal, or it could be Apple Pay or Google Pay. I see a lot of people in the Bitcoin community very passionate, doing very cool things. You know, when I describe Bitcoin, I say it's an economic imperative, it's a technology imperative, and it's a moral imperative. The economic imperative is $400 trillion worth of currency and currency derivatives that are being devalued by the currency devaluation. So everybody in the world has this problem, right? So it's motivational to have a solution to the problem faced by every investor on the planet. If you own bonds, it's $100 trillion worth of bonds with a negative real yield. If you own commercial real estate, your commercial real estate's got rents capped at CPI, which means you have a negative real yield on real estate. If you own value stocks, the value stocks are valued based upon the discounted value of the cash flows. If you have a utility company growing cash flows at 2% a year, and if the currency is devaluing at 15% a year, you've got a negative real yield on your cash flows. People don't get it if they're elitist in the Western world. Yeah, you live in Manhattan, you got a bank, and you have you have your money invested in NASDAQ. Okay, well, good for you. What's your solution to the 2 billion people in Africa and Asia and South America? Don't live in Manhattan. Don't have a bank account. Don't have a brokerage. You know, the 1.7 billion people on the planet don't have a bank, and when they actually make some money, they can buy the local currency, and the local currency is devaluing at 80% a year. Okay? That's what people don't get. So the next big tech move is digital property on mobile devices, and that takes me to the moral imperative. See, the thing about Bitcoin is if I took big tech and I ripped off, if I took away the product and the CEO and the board of directors and the company and all the employees, and I just left the big tech and it didn't ship anything and nobody worked for it, can you see how that is less risky, less moving parts than when I give it? When you give Amazon 1 million employees, you can unionize them. And when you give Apple 10 products, they have to upgrade them. And then when you give Google a headquarters, well, you can regulate them. And so when you give the company stuff, people, you create more attack surfaces. So that's why with Bitcoin, I can imagine, if I buy 100,000 Bitcoin and it is whatever, 0.5% of the network, maybe I'm holding that 1,000 years. Well, Mike, what has to happen for that to be valuable in 1,000 years? Nothing different than what's happening now. If you start with $1 million and you want to make $1 billion, maybe you want to start a company. In fact, maybe I'll say, I started with a $5,000 furniture loan at age 24. In order to create a multi-billion-dollar company with $5,000 of capital, you better start a company. You need to invent something. So if you don't have any capital, but you have, if you have intellect and passion, ambition, you start on the application area and then you move backwards. $400 trillion of the money in the ecosystem is CFI. It's traditional finance. And so if you want to see this thing really explode, what you want is for the insurance companies, the Mass Mutuals, the New York Lifes, the AIGs, you want them to rotate $100 billion portfolio that's all bonds into 30 or 40 or 50 or $100 billion of Bitcoin. And then as they rotate their traditional bond assets into digital property, the entire ecosystem will expand, and then you can start to use that digital property as collateral for the next thing and the next thing.